Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Movies in a Podshell, the podcast which takes one great film, usually, and couples it with another classic film from another era. Again, usually. This week's pick, though, Romeo and Juliet. It's Valentine's week. We're hopeless romantics. I'm Jamie, and as usual, I'm joined by my co-host, part-time Charlie. But you guys can call him Jonny. How you doing, Jonny?
Not good after that one. I was hoping for Mr. Worldwide again, but hey, I'll take what I could get.
Listen, you've had Roger Deakins and Mr. Worldwide 2 weeks in a row. I think you're doing all right. I had to knock you down. I had to bring you down a little bit. This week we're covering Romeo and Juliet. It's Valentine's week or day or whatever. Whenever you're listening to it, it could be the middle of June, but you're listening to this episode. So here goes nothing. We usually start off with what we've been watching, but this week we are starting off with a question that was at the end of last week's podcast that we simply couldn't answer. And it was a what if scenario. So Vicky wrote into moviesinapodshell@gmail.com, just like you can. And she said she wanted to basically ask a question around what if, like, scenarios in films, what if something didn't play out the way it played out? So Jonny, what have you got? What sort of stuff have you got for that?
So I've got one. It's if the Cuban Missile Crisis someone had actually fired the first shot, so the nuclear war happens in the 60s. So there was in 1962 there was the big standoff between the Americans and the Russians. What if the missile was actually fired and the nuclear war started there? But then I just thought maybe that's just the start of Terminator, just 40 years early, because it starts the future war. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I've gone on a completely different angle to that one. So, I mean, first of all, I was thinking, like, what if Neo took the blue pill? Like,
such a rubbish film.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. A rubbish film, but probably a better trilogy. So if Neo took the blue pill, he goes back and he carries on with his really bad office job, and he carries on being a coder or playing his online games or whatever it is that he does. And there's that. So no more Mr. Anderson, just plain old Neo doing his office job.
It sounds like a bit like the Truman Show, though, because people would still be looking and watching him knowing he's the one. But he'd just be in this world where everyone knows about it but him. Yeah.
You know the amount of it would literally play out like it would be more to true life than any other film that's ever been made. Like, you know, the amount of people out there that's like slobbing around, but the natural raw talent they've got inside their body that they just didn't quite go on that path hasn't been unleashed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he ends up being a coder instead of the one. I would never want that to happen because The Matrix is one of the best action films ever made, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that.
Behind Terminator 2.
Okay.
Which is the best action film ever made. Fact. What do you say about that?
I think that's a massive shout out for episode 5 to call that out. I would say I really love Terminator 2. I think my only complaint is, and this is being difficult, I now only ever really watch the special edition, not the theatrical, and I remember thinking the pacing on the theatrical is better. There's a lot of extra. There's like an extra 20 or 30 minutes in the.
Yeah,
it's a fair bit.
Yeah, so the bit where they go in the back of his head and they turn off it. They turn the screw to make so he can actually learn things.
Yeah, it's all good development, but there's some bits where it just drags. But the one thing I love about the special edition is Michael Biehn's in it, and you don't see him in the theatrical, which I always forget. He's only in the flashback in the one version, not the other one.
Ah, yeah. Sorry, Michael Biehn is Kyle Reese from the first film.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Oh, yeah, amazing. Yeah, I do remember that now. I was trying to figure out who Michael Biehn was.
Sorry, that's my fault. I don't know how we got into Terminator 2 being the best action film ever, even if I don't particularly disagree. Still think it's a big call. I've still got some more what-if scenarios. So I've gone from what-ifs that if Hollywood would have made these films rather than a scenario changing within. So if Sean Connery had not left and he'd done on Her Majesty's Secret Service, I think it genuinely would have been considered as being the best Bond, definitively. But because of the casting of George Lazenby, it's viewed in a different light. So I'd love to see a what-if scenario if that had happened in terms of casting. I don't know, because I've not seen On Her Majesty's Secret Service still, but what I was gonna say on that particular segue, apparently Spielberg was actually wanting to direct a Bond film, but instead he made the Indiana Jones film. That is true. In the old Bond crew, if you were a producer or an editor, you'd eventually work your way up to director. So the guy who directed on Her Majesty's Secret Service was one of the editors early on, and then he shot Second Unit, and then they kind of promoted from within. So getting in a Spielberg or something like that would have been so out of character at the time. And also, we wouldn't have had Indiana Jones, so I'm quite glad that we did get Indiana Jones, to be completely honest.
Exactly. And yeah, so, but I did see that, yeah, Spielberg, imagine a Spielberg Bond, it would have been incredible. But yeah, the bit where the opening scene in Temple at the club,
yes,
it's like an obvious homage to
Very much
Dr.
so.
No when he's introduced. So yeah, I really like that.
But I don't like the fact that club's called Obi-Wan. It always annoys me that club's called Obi-Wan.
That's what I mean.
It just triggers me straight away.
Yeah, massive. It's blatantly a homage.
What's your final what if, though?
So my final what if was, do you remember when Superman was being cast and there was a little known actor being cast as Superman? We seen some behind the scenes stills of him as Superman.
Is this the Nicolas Cage Superman film? Because I would love to see that.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Can you imagine Nicolas Cage as Superman? I think he would have been amazing.
And
So
Tim
what
Burton's
if-
Superman would have been so out there and wicked. There's a whole documentary about this. You know, a guy on Patreon did a whole thing about it. You can watch it. And I would recommend, because it goes through how far down the line they were, what the script was, all this stuff. Because the fact they got pictures of him in the suit with his long black hair.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't believe that. So yeah, when I seen those pictures, I thought they were fake because I was like, that is ridiculous. Like Nicolas Cage as Superman. But the more I sort of, as a lot of people, Nicolas Cage was a bit of a meme at one time. Like people would just like rip him and stuff. But I think he's like, I love him. Like I think he's ace, and he does a very particular type of acting really, really well. And he's sort of like an indie darling nowadays. But to see him as Superman, I really would have loved it.
I love the things that don't get made in Hollywood are almost as interesting as what does get made. There's a documentary about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4, which never happened, about who would have been in it, and again, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, because he never wanted Venom in it, and there's a whole story about what it would have been, and I think it would have been better and more focused. So I'm one of those people that obsesses as much over the failed scripts or the ideas that seem better that they don't go with, or almost the original writer's idea before a group of people say that won't make us enough money, it has to have this, this and this and this in, and it's the too many cooks problem, which we've talked about a lot. And sometimes it works, let's be honest, sometimes it works, sometimes it's good feedback, but sometimes really good ideas just get lost. But then there is probably an element of we romanticize these ideas because they're not made. They could also be complete trash.
Yeah, you are right.
You know.
Yeah, we all want what we can't have.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's but what you've just been speaking about is definitely is so exciting to sort of read. It's sort of the shoulda, coulda, woulda, like what if
100%
scenarios, and yeah, we fantasize about it and romanticize about it because I guess we just want to see what it would have been. And yeah, so I fully agree with you. And I just would have Tim Burton Superman as well. I'm not really the biggest fan of Tim Burton, but what he did for Batman and Batman Returns, wowzers. I love that. It just worked so well.
Just to touch really briefly on that, I fairly recently read a book on Tim Burton. I didn't realise how young he was when he did the first Batman, but he was backed. I mean, we've talked about examples where people weren't backed on their first film by studios. Jack Nicholson apparently was mega on his side and just stood his corner, and apparently that's why he was able to do as much as he did, because the studios just thought, what's this guy doing? It's so gothic, it's so different. But because I think we spoke a bit about this as well with Seven, with the fact Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman were on side, and they were the ones kind of bugging the studio saying, well, let him have this and let him do that. It just shows if you've got someone behind you, you can kind of get away with it if you haven't got that big budget. You know what I'm saying? Sorry, if you haven't got a film like Jaws behind you, which is always the argument, like Spielberg had a big film like Jaws behind him so he could do the next project and the next project. That if you've got star backing of someone that the studio supports and they're calling the shots, and then they're on board with the director, then you're more likely to get that vision out onto screen. And I just find that really interesting.
Oh, yeah. No, and there's something about, I mean, you never know what it would have been like with Tim Burton doing Superman, because that gothic style that he does have in pretty much every single one of his films, him and Batman, they fit together like Lego. Him and Superman, to this day, I don't really think Superman has been done to that epic level that Batman Returns was done. In particular, I love Batman Returns so much, and also the Dark Knight trilogy. obviously the original Superman films with what's his name, Christopher Reeves.
Yeah,
they were really good. Well, the first couple were really good. I just feel like we still haven't seen the pure potential. And again, I'm a fan of Man of Steel. I am a big fan of Man of Steel, as are you. We both are.
Very much, I hate the saying, but it is a post 9/11 take on it, though. And I think people still want to see a Henry Cavill. I never know how to say his name properly. Cavill.
Henry Cavill, yeah.
See his version of Superman being optimistic. Because in the Justice League Joss Whedon one, which I know now is not canon, I don't know, they're kind of shifting that all out. Whatever.
Oh man, I'm so excited for the Snyder Cut because I'm a massive fan of Zack Snyder.
No, genuinely, I think as a visualist he's brilliant, but I think sometimes his scripts let him down, and I think we've said very similar things about Ridley Scott actually. But Man of Steel is quite a bleak take on Superman. I think it would be great to see Henry Cavill get the chance to do an optimistic version of Superman, which we did see in the last 10 minutes of Justice League Joss Whedon, but it'll be intrigued to see what he's like in the new Justice League cut, the 4-hour version or whatever it is when it comes out.
Oh god, yeah.
I cannot wait.
Yeah, I am really neither can I. I'm really excited. It might be really dull, but who knows? It's something to be really excited about.
Even if it's atrocious, and I don't think it will be, by the way. But even if it is completely atrocious, it's actually people have got all these fans about. Is it negative that fandom got to the point where it got so strong that it got this push and got this release, or is it a win for fandom for the fact that they said we want to see the original version? Do you know, it's a real fine line, isn't it?
Because, yeah, definitely.
Because for years, again, on Alien 3, people knew there was a cut of the film which Fincher had seen. It's not a director's cut, it can't be called that because he still wanted to film more afterwards, but there was a version that was as close to what he'd got to in the editing room, and that's what the assembly cut is. But that didn't see the light of day. From 1992 to 2003, no one saw that version of the film. Only when the DVD came out, they saw it. And when they saw it, the dialogue was from set. So it was the audio was awful. It needed ADR, but they couldn't afford to do it, so they didn't do it. And Fox thought no one cared. And the bigger Fincher got and the more success he had, the more they thought, oh, we've got to go back and fix this. And they paid Ripley to come back. They paid Sigourney Weaver to come back. Charles Dance came back. All these actors came back and redid their audio on ADR because of solely from the fact of the fans wanted it, but also because that film got more and more recognition basically the more and more Fincher. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's an example of from a film from 1992 from now, and then you got Justice League as a modern version of that exact situation, but with the internet and with Twitter, because that, you know, the other one was all letter writing campaigns and very small online.
Yeah.
Whereas this is hashtag release the Snyder Cut, which went viral for years, literally.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget, Snyder he didn't make the film because his daughter was really, really ill. I am devastated that we didn't get to see more Batfleck. I really am, because I think I was so hyped to see Ben Affleck in the role of Batman, but obviously he had a lot of personal problems at the time. So and it just didn't work out, like the creative direction and all that kind of thing. Like DC Universe hasn't really worked out in general. But then the only other thing I wanted to say was that I really want to see a Clark Kent film, like focus on Clark Kent and less on Superman, and see how that looks. I think that'd be so interesting.
You could argue actually the original Supermans do focus more on Clark Kent, and that's why they are successful, especially the first one. Yeah.
They do, and especially because Christopher Reeve is perfect, absolutely perfect.
Brilliant.
I love him. So yeah, and that is that question done. That was a long wee discussion. And the only other thing we usually talk about is what we've been watching. Jonny, I know you haven't been watching anything because we've been stacked big time.
Pod.
The only thing I watched was Pulp Fiction last night.
You did.
And yes, and like I said before, whenever someone said to me, if someone says to me, what's your favorite Quentin Tarantino film? It's usually the last Quentin Tarantino film that I watched.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, I just fall in love with it. Like when someone says, what's your favorite whiskey? It's usually the whiskey I'm drinking right there and then. It's, oh God. I hadn't seen Pulp Fiction in a few years, probably. I've seen it loads of times, but just not in a few years. And to this day, I do think it is Tarantino's best. And
I'd agree.
The monologues, the editing is insane. Like the way those stories are so jumbled but fit so perfectly.
The way they intertwine
Incredible.
is brilliant. And he said when he was making Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which we talked about in our previous episode, that was the idea he was going for with the narratives. I know they always intertwine to some extent, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the first one in a while which really sunk into that. Because Django's pretty linear, isn't it, really? In terms of following one guy.
Oh, yeah, it is.
out,
No, it absolutely is, yeah. It definitely is.
So
is Death Proof. I think the only ones that sort of play with that is Reservoir Dogs, of course, Pulp Fiction, and then again Kill Bill. I think that's So at the beginning of Kill Bill, So I mean, he does like to play. He doesn't like to play with time as much as a certain director we know, Christopher Nolan. You're looking at me weird. Like Christopher Nolan, he loves playing with time.
He does.
Hey?
Yeah.
He loves. Pulp Fiction is unbelievable, and I absolutely loved it just as much probably the 10th, 15th time as I did the first time. Welcome everyone to the show, the main part of the show where we're going to talk about this week's film, Romeo and Juliet, but which version? We're talking about the Baz Luhrmann version.
Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight, for I never saw true beauty till this night.
Jonny, this was your pick this week, actually, wasn't it?
Was it actually my pick? I can't even remember.
It was your pick. You were feeling romantic this week.
Oh, I was feeling romance. Yeah, so this is one of those films that I have seen so many times because at school, when they were trying to get you into Shakespeare, this would be what they ham at you. So in English, we watched it a fair few times, and then I ended up studying it for media studies. So it's a film I hadn't seen them for years because I kind of felt like I'd been there, done that, didn't want to see it again. Having rewatched it, I really enjoyed it. Tell me what your thoughts were. Did you enjoy it going in?
I did, yeah. So I'd seen it years ago.
Okay.
It's weird because I reckon around the time I was watching these kinds of films, this was out in '96.
Yeah.
So I always associate this with Titanic. Weirdly,
Yes.
as in I don't mean they don't. Obviously, they're completely separate films, but they've both got Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, he almost turned down Titanic because he said Claire Danes was offered Titanic with him. And she said
she
no.
Was.
And she said she couldn't give any more away because she'd been away for that long. And DiCaprio obviously took the jump. But it's interesting because even then he was doing an interview. He was 21 when this came out, and I watched one of the interviews around the time. And he's talking about Titanic. And even then he was talking about not taking big mainstream commercial projects. He only wants to work with interesting directors. I thought at 21 he made that decision. It's just crazy. Right. But he never said he ruled out commercial projects. But his point was he picked stuff that's interesting material rather than doing a blockbuster. Because people talk about how Leo's never done a superhero film. And he's still one of the biggest A-listers. Do you know what I mean? No, but the fact that in this day and age to have done as well as he's done without doing something like that. He's not had an action film franchise. He's not had it's all been
No, he hasn't.
Amazing
He has. Yeah. Definitely. He's definitely not sold the soul to the devil. He's been in massive films, but most of the time they become massive because he's in them.
100%. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's
he's just pure star power. So I hadn't seen this probably since the 90s. I'm going to be fully honest.
Wow.
Probably maybe early 2000s. I associate it with Titanic. Let me just say, this is the most fun and exciting way to watch Romeo and Juliet or learn about Romeo and Juliet. It's pure over the top. It is like a theatre production, the way it's been done, but at the same time, it's like an action film. So the first thing I wrote down, right? So the beginning of Romeo and Juliet literally punches you square in the face.
Yes, it does.
This is what I wrote. Looks like it's directed by Michael Bay. Tell me about that, Jonny.
Okay, what I was going to say was I think the opening of this film is one of my favourite film openings. So we start with the TV news broadcast, which is brilliant, and it sets up the warring feud between the Montagues and Capulets, and it shows it all through news reports and footage. And you start with this really calm news broadcast, and then the epic music, which I can guarantee if any of our listeners watch English Premier League football, is a piece of music which always plays when they walk out onto the pitch, doesn't it? You know,
it does. A final or something.
Sounds like the start of Carmina Burana for anyone who cares. It's also used on X Factor a lot, so you will have heard it at many different points. And it has these ridiculously quick cuts. So you see a quick whip pan to a helicopter up in the sky, quick whip pan to footage of people fleeing in the streets from the gang warfare, quick footage of a pistol coming out, then to cars chasing away. It's just super fast. But what's amazing is it's used like a TV title sequence. So it does quick, and then it whip pans to a character, then it freeze frames and it has the name. So it's a really quick way of getting us to know that's Juliet's dad, that's Juliet's mum, that's Romeo's dad, that's Romeo's mum, that's Tybalt, that's so-and-so. And it's information overload within the first 2-3 minutes. And I think it does kind of feel like you are being hit in the head a little bit, but it's setting the tone for what's about to come, really. Just saying, forget about your expectations and what you thought Romeo and Juliet was going to be. This is, as you said, action-packed, quick-paced. Yeah, love the intro.
Yeah. Those cuts really reminded me of like Edgar Wright.
Yes.
Like, you know, those you know when it really speeds up the camera and then slows down, then speeds up, then slows down. That kind of thing. I don't know what it's called.
It's like it looks like speed ramps, but I don't know if they're actually increasing the film speed. I think it's just the way the camera moves. It's almost like in a dance, slow, quick, slow. But in terms of the edits, slower shot, quick whip away.
Yeah,
but yeah.
See, I thought it had that look of old films when there's a car chase and then the car comes around the corner and they speed up the film. I thought it looked like that.
Yeah, it's speed ramped, and I think some clips might be, but yeah, it's just the way it's cut. It's just it's such a dramatic. It's the music. It's very choral for the people who haven't heard the English Premier League and walk
it's
out.
So epic,
it's
isn't
choral
it?
and
it's so
epic
epic
and fast paced, and it just sets up how melodramatic the whole thing is.
I think this could be one of the bravest, boldest, like most innovative moves from a director I've ever seen, to be quite frank.
We should talk about him, Baz Luhrmann, because it's quite interesting how he got into doing this. So he had a film before called Strictly Ballroom, which did well, got nominated for BAFTAs and for a lot of Australian awards. The style in this film is very much present from early days there.
Right, okay.
It's very much a style, and people who've seen Moulin Rouge or Great Gatsby, I think you'll see similar traits in those films. I have seen Australia. Australia as well has some elements of it, but not to the same extent. So Baz Luhrmann was approached by Fox, I think it was at the time, who wanted to see if he got any projects in the pipeline after his success in '92 with Strictly Ballroom. And he had an idea for making a modern musical, which he didn't do, which I eventually believe would become Moulin Rouge. But he said, I've got this idea. It's kind of crazy. We take Shakespeare and do it in modern day. And they said, oh, so you'd update the script? He went, no, we just take the original dialogue and deliver it with these actors. And apparently half the studio hated it. Half of them loved the idea, but the side that loved it just funded it. And he got Leo to fly over to Australia, and he did a screen test with him delivering the lines, but kind of showed them the style it was going to be, because I think people couldn't picture how it was going to work. But then once they saw Leonardo DiCaprio, who was on the verge of becoming a heartthrob at this point, they probably thought, right, we're going to get enough bums on seats for this to be worthwhile, and we can see the style's going to work, so let's go with it. A lot of famous actresses went for the role, and the lady who eventually got it was Claire Danes, as we all know. But Claire Danes was 17 and Leo was 21, but together they averaged out, because Leo looked younger and she looked slightly older. Yeah. But they tried people such as Natalie Portman, but I think she was older than Claire Danes, but looked too young against Leo, and then it didn't look quite right. I just love the fact that he had this ballsy move for this outlandish style. And although it's, like you said, it's this film's not a musical, but there is a sequence, which we'll get onto at a party, which is very much like a musical in the way it's performed and very over the top. The whole artistic choices of this film, like you said, are like a theatre production, because they're big, bright, popping colours. So they're wearing Hawaiian shirts or all of it. And the music choices are very 90s. And if you
got the Cardigans in there, I remember that was such a huge song back then.
So good.
Love Me, it was something like, I can't remember what it's called, but it's such a big song.
You and me always, all that. They've got.
Oh yeah. And it's incredible.
Yeah, love it. So we probably ought to start talking about the film itself. So the first sequence I thought we'd go into is the opening one at the garage, really, which kind of sets up the tone of the gang warfare, if you want to set us off.
Yeah, so the garage, like just a normal filling up the car, and this is what I find. This is why it's so bizarre, that the fact that you don't really know what to expect. There's a news broadcast. You're like, this is Romeo and Juliet. What is going on? And all of a sudden, there's like people in these big cars, fancy cars, and then the Montagues are just sort of, they're literally filling up with gas. The Montagues, I always feel like they are the softer of the families, like they are the less brash, brutal
less
of the
aggressive.
families, and the Capulets, they are the the Capulets are the hardcore, they're the bullies of the two families. That's always what I imagined. And then so when I was watching it, I was thinking, this is obviously, it starts off, essentially it introduces it, and it's a gang war. This is a film about gangs. Like it's Romeo and Juliet. They don't describe, it's never described as a love story, like the actual story of Romeo and Juliet. It's described as a tragedy. Mm-hmm. But this in particular, this film, it starts off, and this is like, it's a gang war. It looks like it's going to be an action film.
Yeah.
And that's when, like you were saying, Jonny, all these fast cuts, the Capulets arrive on the scene, and it's funny because I always remember the Capulets because of the heels of Tybalt's shoes.
Oh, the amazing
like
metal.
Steel heels. And I'm like, I just imagine like the caps, they're made of metal, and they just come on and start kind of bullying the Montagues a little bit. There's this standoff, and then it all kind of kicks off from there. It just sort of introduces the fact that these two families are feuding.
There's a lot with in Shakespeare. There was a lot of duels. So it's, how do you get a duel or a setup for a duel to work in modern day? So they have pistols, and the attention to detail in this film is crazy, because when they zoom in on the pistols are named after the swords from the time. It's like, what an amazing detail. That's such a cool idea to kind of, I don't know, I just love that. And I'm trying to think what style to describe it for someone who's not seen a Baz Luhrmann film. It's like jump zooms. It's almost Tarantino-esque, actually, when he does the duels in Django. It's pretty similar.
Yeah, so there's the duels in Django, the way the Kill Bill shot. It's honestly like an old kung fu movie. The way the camera zooms in really quick, it definitely is. Yeah, it's got that 70s style of filmmaking. It's so peculiar because you've got all this going on, and then they start speaking, and then you realize slowly, oh my God, this dialogue is actually taken directly from the play. Whatever it is, it's a play, isn't it?
Yeah, but the thing that's amazing is they use the fast pace, the cuts, the music, and the energy to distract you from that. And I think it's very much, the way they've shot it is to keep you engaged. I'm sure it is. The way they move the camera, a lot of it seems to be handheld. Even the behind the scenes, it might still be on a Steadicam rig, but a lot of it's handheld. There's not much that's actually locked off. I really like the style, actually. It can look at times a bit like it's shot for someone who has a low attention span, maybe, but I think the point was...
do you know what's funny? Sorry, man, it's so funny you say that. So I actually said the film's got ADHD. It's like proper quick editing, and I think you're absolutely right there when you say the way it's shot almost would distract from the... Because you don't really know... You get the gist of what they're saying, but because it's in Shakespearean verse, you don't really understand it all. No. And I'll go into there's a couple of like famous lines that what you think they mean, they don't actually mean.
Yeah.
So basically after that all happens, it kind of, you sort of see Romeo is kind of isolated, isn't he, on his own.
Sorry, just before we go into that bit, I just want to finish that with, after the garage, there's a big kick-off, and the Montagues and Capulets have a drive down the street, and there's some violence, let's say, some people get shot, and you just see the carnage of how it affects people on the street. So the poor people who live in Verona are having to deal with this gang warfare. So it's nothing to do with them, but it's the effects on them. So the police commissioner comes in and he says, from now on, no more fights between you two. We've had enough of your nonsense. And he's got both the fathers in there, and he says, you control your lot, we're not having any more of this. And then after that, Romeo's dad gets in the limo with Romeo's mother, and it's great because it shows that even in modern day, the issues of the parents are they've got a moody teenager and they don't know how to deal with him. And the conversation is basically, what's going on with that moody teenager? I don't know, really. And then you cut to see him. And if you've ever watched The OC, this must be where the inspiration's from, because it's orange, sunset tinged. indie music, nice, slow, laid back. It's all shot like
California.
Yeah, but all shot like a dream. By the way, I love the OC, so I'll talk about it all day.
Oh God, me too. Yeah,
but
if only we could have an episode about the OC.
The whole look and style of the O series, that again, because this was popular, it probably is influenced by that. It just is. That's the way things go. But that whole style of emo, it's not emo, but you know.
Oh no, I think I know what you mean. Yeah, it's definitely the birth of like that kind of sort of thing.
And he's pining. You know, you've just said he's lonely as isolate. He's pining over the last love, and people always forget this in Romeo and Juliet. You know, he's pining over the last one who's broken his heart. I'll be completely honest. I don't fully understand from his dialogue what's actually happened, but it's not gone well, and he's dreaming about a negative future, and he doesn't think things are going to go well for him.
No, and I mean, it's difficult to go through this film play by play anyway, because it is like we all know the story so well. That thing happens, and Romeo's kind of on his own. You realise then he's a little bit different from the rest of the Montagues. He is like sort of isolated, and he's got different ideas. And then the next thing that really happens, the next big plot point, is this huge party is going on. So there's a huge party. We see both families are there, and then I guess that there's lots of dancing, and then Romeo sees Juliet for the first time. And can I just say, you mentioned about Claire Danes earlier. She's fantastic in this role. She's so pure, and so there's almost like a plainness to her. But in like, I'm not saying that. I know plain.
I know what you mean.
Me calling her plain sounds like I'm saying that in a derogatory way. Like, I don't mean that at all. But what I mean is she plays Juliet perfectly because she is so pure. And I've got down like what. So I don't really want to skip ahead too much, but she's at this party, she's dressed as an angel.
Yeah, 100%, and that could represent many things, from a virgin potentially, or from the look that he's dressed. And we are skipping ahead, and I want to go back, but I will say, you know, he's dressed like a knight in shining armor, walks in to an angel. But first things first, Claire Danes had to wear a wig for the entirety of this thing, so I feel sorry for her on that one, because I think that always sucks. Yeah, I found that out.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
no way.
That's not good. That sucks for her, but. They set her up at 17. She plays it incredibly well, because obviously in this interpretation, Romeo and Juliet aren't the ages they are in the play, because I know in the play Juliet is 14, and that's not what they're going for with this. I think they've had to update those themes for very obvious reasons. But Juliet's father, before the party, is obsessed with the idea of marrying her off to Paul Rudd's character. And Paul Rudd is updated to being this. To be fair, there's not much wrong with him. He's just. Do you know what I mean?
No, he's not Leonardo DiCaprio, is he?
But
don't get me wrong. I love Paul Rudd. I love him. Yeah. But in this, he's a bit of a loser.
In his defense, he's a wealthy guy with his business suit on, who the dad approves of. So it's I'll arrange the wedding to my daughter. Apologies, but. Before this, Juliet she has a really sweet relationship, and it sets up how childlike she is with her housekeeper. And she's speaking to the housekeeper and says, "Oh, I don't want to marry him. I want to be a teenager and have fun." And she says, "Well, go out and have fun then." And that's what links to the party and affects how she reacts when she meets Romeo, for the first time, because the housekeeper's kind of okayed her to be a teenager and get away with these things. But the other thing I should say is, when Romeo, before the party, he discusses a dream he's had, and the dream actually foreshadows the end, because he starts talking about he's having these really negative dreams about he's going to have a rush of emotions come to him, and after all this, it's going to lead to his fate and his death. And everyone says, "Stop being so dramatic, Romeo. You're talking absolute nonsense." But it's getting to us, the audience, that he's a very emotional character. We've just heard him talk about his ex-girlfriend and how it's all gone pear-shaped. Then he's talking about his dramatic dream, but it shows in the visualization of the dream, the depiction of the dream, you see him doing the walk he does at the end of the film. But as he's walking down, we don't see what he's walking towards, but he's walking down the aisle of a church, and he's got blue neon crosses behind him and the candles. Yeah. And again, for me, someone described this as an Instagram haven, this film, because of the use of contrasting colours with neon blue and yellows and stuff, and they're so right. And that sequence is bang on, but we don't know what he's heading towards. But the point is, he believes all this. We talk about the star-crossed lovers and the fact this is all fate and it's predetermined to happen. his dream kind of sets up the idea of it's what, you know, he knows this will, he doesn't know exactly what will happen, but he knows something not good's about to happen, which leads him to go, you know, when he goes to the party, it all starts to unravel what's going to be the issue.
Well, yeah, so they're at this party, and it is, I mean, if anything, Baz Luhrmann knows how to shoot a good party. He knows, like, we've seen it in Gatsby and Moulin Rouge and this. So essentially we see them at the famous fish tank scene. So they're on opposite sides of this huge fish tank. And for me, I seen that and I was like, right, so that it's almost like the fish tank acts as like a barrier, almost like an ocean separates them.
Yeah.
That's how far away they are from being together.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's dressed as a knight, she's dressed as an angel, pure, innocent, that kind of, like you said, maybe virgin. That's probably another one of the how it could be portrayed. And so then it all sort of amps up. What are you going to say?
I was going to say, there's a key point in this film with water. A lot of the key scenes happen around water, and I'm sure you've read this too. Romeo pops a pill before he turns up at the party with everybody as well. So he's seeing this dance routine madness happen through, as we've talked about, these really over-the-top cuts. A lot of people looking directly at camera. Juliet's father's manically laughing at camera, and you're in Romeo's POV, and it's really disconcerting. And it's as Romeo moves, the camera moves with him, but it's tied to him, and it's really trippy. And he puts water on his face. He runs to the bathroom, puts water on his face to calm down. And as he does the water, all the cuts go from being quick to completely slow burn. And that's when he sees Juliet through the fish tank. And the point is, like, water, and it's
clarity.
Yeah, we're getting deep here, but that kind of thing. But
deep. I like that.
Yeah.
You see, I got you there. You got me.
But you'll love this. The cinematographer said this was an absolute nightmare because of the reflections. So what they ended up having to do was only putting in fluorescent tubes into the tank out the camera's eye line, and that was the only source of light, because if they tried to light it the traditional way, you could either see all the camera crew through that way or the wrong reflection.
Right, okay.
So they literally had a light bright enough to power that, and I thought I love that.
Here he is. I call him part-time Charlie, but he's not. He's here dishing out the info as usual. So yeah, and so after this little bit, they're all of a sudden it does escalate quite quickly at this point.
Very much so.
Because there's only so it is a play at the end of the day. It's just an interpretation. So at this point now, they're in this lift, and they're sort of having like this back and forth, like, and then they start like really passionately kissing in the lift.
And the camera at this point is full 360. And do you know what it reminded me of?
Yeah, it's going full blown Michael Bay.
Do you know what I was going to say as well, though? It reminded me so much of Vertigo. The way the music swells up is so that really romantic, you know.
The crescendo.
Yeah, it's just... I'm a sucker for stuff like this. But apparently... Again,
I love the music, yeah.
The set had to rotate. So, because of the way it was lit and the camera... Do you see what I'm saying? Because it goes 360. They couldn't have the camera go around 360 for it to work. So the set rotated as well as the camera, I think, opposing ways. So you never saw the bit that wasn't the set because there's a hole where the camera goes. I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. So yeah, love that. That
is cool.
I love that.
Oh, no stone unturned by old Baz. Yeah, so they're having this kiss in the lift, and then all of a sudden, like, the lift opens, and Juliet's is she a
housekeeper, maid?
Who's the woman? Housekeeper, yeah.
She
drags her away, and she's like, no. As in, like, naughty, like, you can't do that. Like, because obviously the housemaid knows that he is a Montague, and she's a Capulet. I think that she just knows, doesn't she?
But so what's funny is as well, when she drags her away, she then gets like given back to Paul Rudd, who's the arranged marriage situation. But
how boring!
As she's dancing with Paul Rudd, and they're doing like a really casual. I'm dancing for Jamie on the camera, but obviously you can't see. As they're dancing away, slow dancing away, she just looks at Leo the whole time. She's just intensely looking at Romeo and not even paying any attention to this guy who's dancing with her. It's just brilliant.
I love Paul Rudd in almost anything, and but he is so good at playing that character, the character with sort of like that shit and grin. He is in this. He's just boring, isn't he? Compared to Leonardo DiCaprio, like most of us are boring compared to Leonardo DiCaprio, especially when he was that age, looking absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, so at that point, she's getting dragged up the stairs by a housekeeper, and then they both realise then that they're opposite families.
Down all slows down, and the music comes down. It's all very quiet, and I think there is the film itself is slowed down for Leo's reaction when he looks over.
The realization.
And it's that moment of, literally.
He's fell in love. He's absolutely fell head over heels in love with Juliet in this sort of like, in the space of it's such a short period of time, but the love is so powerful.
Sequence, from seeing her, thinking,
absolutely,
she's stunning, she's dancing with Paul Rudd. Then he says, "Okay, I'm gonna try." Paul Rudd gets turned away. He kind of steals her hand, gets her in the lift. They kiss for the first time. Very, very romantic. She gets out the lift, is pulled away, and within that 3 or 4 minute spell. By the way, we should say, because we've talked briefly about the score, the song for the film is Desiree's "Kissing You," isn't it? And the piano,
but I don't know, but I really, really love it.
It's a piano, really short piano piece with some strings alongside, and it soars every time they kiss. It like completely soars, and it's just brilliant. It's the music for me is what makes that scene. Without that music, you wouldn't buy they fall in love that quickly, but it swells as if. And this sounds really cheesy, but when you're a teenager, someone pointed out this when we were talking about Pucks being a wallflower, they were getting across the point that when you're a teenager, the things that feel bad feel the worst thing ever in life, and the things that feel good, it's your favourite thing ever in life. It's the best feeling ever. There's nothing there's no, like moderation. And I think with this, it's like...
Yeah, like being on drugs. Like it's almost like being on drugs, isn't it?
And when he sees Juliet, there's no, I like her. It's, I'm completely in love with her. I would die for her. It's that thing. And obviously...
There is nothing else.
There's nothing else. And I think Shakespeare gets that across very well, and more credit to Baz Luhrmann for trying to get people in our era to buy into that, because I think it's pretty difficult in an age of...
I mean, you say our era, mate. Well, like it was 1996. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
I would have been 4 when this was released, actually. So,
oof, you youngster, you old youngster, and I'd have been 7. Making me feel old, shouting me out on the podcast.
Love it.
So she gets dragged up the stairs. She gets dragged away, but then she runs back of this last sort of this defiance. Like runs back for this last ditch look at Romeo, and they share this moment of them looking at each other, and they just can't believe that they can't be together.
There's literally she says he can't be, he can't be one of them, and he is.
Exactly. It's like being a vegetarian and finding out a Big Mac is made of meat. The devastation. And so after this, Romeo goes straight back to her. He comes in, he goes into her back garden, which is amazing, by the way. She's got a pool. She's got
fairy lights everywhere, and it looks incredible. Yeah. Again, Instagram haven, blue pool lit up, massive saturation, then fairy lights leading all the way to your balcony bedroom, and she's talking about him, and he's literally trying to climb up, which when you say it out of context seems quite stalkery. He's trying to climb up to her balcony.
It's well creepy, but she completely buys into it.
She's going, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo? He's thinking, I'm right here.
So on that, right? So she is talking and he's listening. She doesn't know he's there, and she says, and it's a really, like, obviously quite a famous piece of the literature, and she says, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?
Yes.
So and so to the naked ear, we think that means like, Romeo, Romeo, where are you, Romeo? But actually, it doesn't mean that at all. It means, what that actually means is, why are you Romeo? Why is your name Romeo?
Why
are you a Montague?
100%.
That's what that means, and so that's why it's so. She's sort of like, she's saying it out loud outside. She's devastated. She can't believe that this man that this boy she's fell in love with, he's of the other side of the family, and she can't have him.
I always remember, it's the quote before when he first sees her, and it's, what did my heart love till now, forswear its sight, for I never saw true beauty till this night. And that's, again, like another good way of instantly getting across. He's just, I've never seen anyone this beautiful ever till right now. Even though we've just...
Do you know what I can't believe? Do you know what I've never heard? I've never heard such a highbrow podcast talking in Shakespearean verse and dissecting a Shakespearean play. This is what you get, listeners, and it's free. I can't believe this is free for you guys. You're getting a film education. You're getting Shakespeare education. I can't quite believe it myself.
Let's delve into why that I remember this and it's not good. When I was a teenager, I thought that the way to pick up girls would be to know Shakespeare. I kid you not. And do you remember on MSN?
What?
Yes.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah.
I need to find a new co-host. What?
So
Please elaborate.
It's so embarrassing.
I can't believe I actually, no, it is. It's embarrassing for me as well. So carry on.
No, I just remember back in the day, if anyone's old enough to remember a thing called MSN, which was a messenger thing, sort of like WhatsApp or
I'm sure everyone knows what MSN is.
Okay, fine. So on MSN, you used to be able to send sound clips of stuff.
Right.
So
you could, yeah.
So people had like pre-existing ones, and there was that annoying one that went, hello, hello. And I thought, oh, what you should do, because I was a nerd and technical, I'd record clips from films. So if I was trying to chat someone up, I could send them the clip.
And what clip would you send them?
That one. The Romeo one.
Oh my God.
Fair to say, it never worked.
Did it ever work?
No.
The
other one, which was just as bad, was James Blunt, and it was just went, you're beautiful.
Oh man, I'm so sad right now. Jonny, I've got to say, like, that the fact that you just sprung that story on me is incredible. And you've made me feel like I must share something embarrassing from myself just to bring balance to the force. But anyway, Ben writes in, just like you can. He writes into moviesinapodshell@gmail.com, and he writes, what are your most embarrassing, like, Valentine's Day cinema experiences? I'll tell you what, to give you a little break, I'll start.
You go.
And to be perfectly honest, I don't think I really have any. So I was racking my brain. I was like, right, the only one I can think of was it wasn't really embarrassing, apart from the film was embarrassing. I once went with a girlfriend when I was very young. Like, we got the bus like 7 miles away to go to the cinema, and we watched She's the Man, which had, I believe it was Amanda Bynes, who is to this day hilarious on the Amanda Show. That was kind of I think that's pretty much it. So what I'll do is I'll share an embarrassing Valentine's Day disaster. Well, not really disaster, just, I guess. Anyway, I was probably about 13 or 14 at the time, and there was a girl that used to, this is nothing to do with movies, but do you know what? Here we go. It's a romantic episode. There's nothing romantic about this. There was a girl that used to hang around the street, and I really, really liked her. I was obviously at the age where I started liking girls and stuff. Really liked her, and I decided to get her a Valentine's Day card, which was there's probably like £5 at the time. Like, so it was like quite a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. Yeah.
Most of my pocket money probably, but the reason why it was £5 is because the card, when you opened it, it said in this like really high pitched voice, like, I love you, like that. So essentially, I wrote to this girl in this card. I don't even think I put my name on it. I said like, from your secret admirer or whatever it is. Apparently, she opened it. I posted it for her when she opened it in front of her family, and it's obviously like, I love you, like in front of her whole family. And she was so mad, and she was like, she didn't speak to me for quite a wee while. Go on. So Jonny, share yours, please. So
at college, these are on 2 separate years, but both when I was at college. So one year was to go and see the first one. Of course, on Valentine's Day, you would go and see a David Fincher film. But in my defence, it was Benjamin Button, which is his most crowd-appeasing film, probably.
His worst film.
I don't enjoy it much, I will say that. Anyway.
Yeah,
that's a story for another day. It's very... In my head, it's so long, and I don't think it is that long. I just think it just didn't sit with me, so it just... Anyway.
Yeah.
And I went on a date with this girl, and this is before I drove. So I got the bus, and it started snowing. So she asked her mum to come and pick her up afterwards. But all the buses stopped running. Because, in England, as soon as it snows, everything just grinds to a halt, even though you can literally drive and do anything. So this date had not gone well because, it's one of those where she said yes to the date, but I got the impression quite quickly that she wasn't bothered. So I'm not quite sure. Yeah. Anyway, then we had to sit through 2 hours and 40 minutes or whatever it was of Benjamin Button. And then afterwards, she just kind of friend-zoned me, and I thought, okay, fine, know where I'm at. But what was made worse was her mum saw it happen, and then at the end she like hugged me goodbye. Then her mum said, "Oh, we can't. There's no buses. We've got to drive him home." So then her mum thought the date had gone well and interrogated me the whole way back, saying, "Oh, so you know, what do you plan on doing in the future? What are you doing at college?" And then I said, "Oh, I'm planning on doing media." And she turned and said, "Oh, that's not a very fruitful career, is it?" And I thought, "Oh." So
well, what do you look at the egg and your face is in perfect alignment, because look at Jonny now, eh? Look at him now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about that one, but yeah.
I mean,
It was just really funny because it was literally at the age of 16, 17 getting grilled as if you're 21 about like your intentions and stuff. I just found it really funny. And then I didn't actually want to say where I lived because I didn't want like any conversation with my parents or anything. So I just got dropped off 10 minutes away, said, "Yeah, around here is fine," and just got out. But when I went back to college on the Monday and had to see the girl, it was just so embarrassing. She's like, "I'm so sorry about my mom," and you know, whatever. And yeah. Anyway, the next one was just more an embarrassing film, again at college. Yeah, it was really annoying because I was one of the youngest in my year. So in England, you have to be 18 to be able to drink, to go out into club. And because my birthday was in August, everyone in my year was going out before me. So I was missing out because when you started seeing someone, inverted commas, or people liked you, they'd say, "Come out on Saturday and we'll go to Lloyd's or we'll go and do this." Jamie came with me to Lloyd's and hated it.
Mate, I was totally smashing the Blue Wickets getting in underage when I was when I was 17.
I remember there was a real clampdown at some point. I think unfortunately it was around the age I started going out. It really did. Anyway. Right. And this girl said, "Oh, you know, come out on Saturday," and I couldn't because they'd all turned 18 and I hadn't. But then we'd agreed to go on this cinema date on Valentine's Day, classic. And I'd spent a lot of money because I bought Ben and Jerry's ice cream at the start in the cinema. So you've already wasted about 20 quid on food before you've even paid for your ticket.
Yeah, 100%.
Horrendous. Anyway, and the film I sat through, which was god awful, was Bounty Hunter. You'll never have heard of it. It's Jennifer Aniston and what's he called?
Gerard Butler. I have heard of it, yeah. I haven't seen it because I just,
it was so bad. So bad. And I just remember thinking, why have I come to see this? Yeah, actually that date didn't go as badly as the other one. There was no embarrassing afters, but I got ditched very shortly afterwards because even though that date went well, I wasn't old enough to start going out in Stourbridge on nights out. So I got ditched very quickly for someone who had a car and did go on nights out. So, yeah.
Well, there you go, Ben. Thanks for writing in and thanks for embarrassing both of us. So here we go. There's more water, believe it or not. So yeah, they have this back and forth for quite a while. Romeo and Juliet do, not Jonny and his date. There was a very short interaction by the sounds of it. Yeah, so well. Romeo and Juliet are having this back and forth, and essentially they're falling in love. They're professing their love. It's so intense. They fall back into the water with each other.
Yeah.
And again, there's that water there, and it stands for clarity.
Or purity, even.
Purity.
Yeah. And the
exactly.
fact, this sounds so... The interpretation is always like when they're under there, they're washed of... They're relinquishing their families. They don't want to be Montagues or Capulets at that point when they're under the water. They're just who they are. They're
washing away their...
You know what I mean? Like washing away your sins and all those, and all that kind of... It's almost what it feels like. But they have a kiss underwater. But when they get back out, they're still in the pool, and she's basically talking about marriage. Straight away, they are talking about getting married the next day.
Yeah, so the next
day. Yeah. Romeo's visited the priest, and he said to the priest, "I want to marry Juliet." And the priest initially saying, "No, that can't happen." But then he thinks it through, and he thinks Romeo and Juliet coming together would be the thing that seals the families together to end the feud, to end the war. And you see in this really quick montage sequence his thought process of what would happen if they came together and how much better it would be for the city. So Juliet and Romeo get married very, very quickly. And again, Instagram heaven, you've got the neon blue crosses, you've got the candles. So for me, it's great representation of the old and the new. The fact that the candles is kind of old Shakespeare, and then the blue neon's very 90s and modernisation of it. And I think that's really cool. And when
it is.
But as soon as they do get married, we cut straight away back to Mercutio, and instantly there's a storm in the clouds. Like in the sky, we see a storm, And it sets up the idea
Yeah.
of even after they've got married, it's this lovely scene with more of Desiree's kissing you, music swelling. We cut to thunderstorm, beach, things aren't right. And
It's like the butterfly effect almost.
yeah, and the wind, and it's blowing a gale straight away. And we know, obviously, as an audience, bad things are about to happen. And it's made worse with the arrival of Tybalt.
So at this point now, we've got the Montagues on the beach, sort of like just chilling out, really, hanging out. And then Tybalt arrives with the Capulets and really starts kicking off and starts wanting to fight Romeo. Romeo doesn't want to fight him because he wants to. It's not right, is it? Why doesn't he want to fight him?
Because they're married, he's saying no more. There is no more confrontation. I won't fight you. He said you can hit me, you can do all these things, but I will not fight you anymore.
And he does. He beats the hell out of him.
And
and Romeo won't hit him back.
Yeah, he beats him to a pulp.
Yeah. And so at this point now, Mercutio, his best friend, who, as we said, isn't related to either family, he sort of steps in and says, like, stop, like, leave him alone, and sort of confronts him. And then at this point now, and probably like this, maybe the second saddest part of the film, Mercutio's stabbed.
Yeah.
And so he's stabbed in the stomach, and obviously Romeo at this point, he sort of runs over to him, and what's he shout? He shouts something, does he?
Plague on both your houses. Because
but not yet. So what he says is Romeo says, like, are you okay? He's like, oh, 'tis but a scratch, a scratch, which is like a really famous line. 'Tis but a scratch, ask for me tomorrow and you shall find me a grave man. And then he says, I will be worm food, something very close to that. And then he starts shouting, curse both your houses, curse both your houses. And it does.
Yeah.
It does curse both their houses.
Yeah. I think, again, it's the destiny, fate, whatever you want to call it, coming in motion. Romeo's dream is coming true, slowly but surely. He saw that there was a big amount of emotion was coming his way, and then he felt that something negative would happen afterwards, and this is the start of the negative spiral. But after Mercutio does die at this point, we zoom far away, and after the death we see the beach, and Mercutio is framed there's a theatre stand on the beach, so like a theatre stage, and he's framed within the theatre. And again, it's just this lovely idea of, here's Shakespeare, it's in a theatre, there he is framed in. And I love that. And again, the storm's starting to really pick up now, and we kind of go almost from daylight to evening. It's not daylight to evening, it's just the fact the storm's getting worse and the wind starts kicking in. And we cut to complete juxtaposition. We cut to Juliet pining in a room. Oh, I've just got married. Life is great. Again, she's got it's really soft focus. She's so innocent. She's looking up, just talking about how excited she is with everything that's happened. But as this happens, we jump cut to what Romeo is doing. Romeo is crying, screaming, driving a car full pace in chase with Tybalt to avenge Mercutio's death. And it's such a juxtaposition, because you've got really light, soft, warm tones to cold, blue, dark, real tight shot of Leo's face as he's driving, and he's so angry. And this is why Leonardo DiCaprio is just brilliant, because he's got tears streaming, but it's anger and frustration. And again, it just feels like a teenager would, because it's just everything's wrong. Not one thing.
Pure angst. Yeah,
everything is
pure
wrong.
Teenage angst. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and it's crazy, because so at this point now, I'm watching the film and I'm like, right, I haven't seen it in maybe, I don't know, 15 years or something. And I'm watching it and I'm like, right, and I also know the plot of Romeo and Juliet. I know what happens. But do you know what? It doesn't matter. You know the plot to Romeo and Juliet. We're sitting here talking on the pod, spoiling it. But at the same time, the film is still so interesting, so exciting, and you almost still can't believe what you're watching. So all these things are happening. Mercutio's dead. Romeo's going on this like rampage now. He's in the car, like you said, close up of his face, and no one does it better, like than Romeo, like than Leonardo DiCaprio with that face and the tears. It's honestly incredible. And he gets Tybalt, doesn't he?
He does.
So he gets him.
What's grim is he gets the car and the car flips, and you think, okay, he's injured. But Tybalt gets out of the car, and then there's a Mexican standoff, and Tybalt won't. They're walking up to the steps, and like in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, you've got the Christ-like figure at the top. In
there's so many images of that Rio de Janeiro Christ-like figure.
Yeah. So it was actually a miniature which they had inserted into the film, which I love. But anyway,
love it.
But the shot is taking place beneath them. So underneath the Christ-like figure, there is a waterfall. So they're backing up onto the steps to this waterfall. Tybalt's with his back to the water and Romeo's chasing him up the stairs. But Tybalt has the pistol and he holds it at Romeo's head and he says, in plain English, he basically says, with Mercutio dead and with our families at feud, just kill me because I cannot deal with this. Life is not worth living. And Tybalt doesn't do it. And Romeo gets more and more frustrated, but he picks up the weapon himself and he shoots him. He shoots Tybalt, but Tybalt falls into water. Now, just before this, there was the death on the beach, right next to the water, in the pool with the cleansing, with the fact it's almost washing away the family ties. Before that, after he's taken the drugs, he washes his face clean, meets Juliet, and it all slows down. And then we have this, which is Tybalt is shot and goes into the water, and the blood stains make the water, turn red. And it's, again, the turning of the tide, things are changing because obviously things are not going to go well now with Juliet when she finds out what has happened.
So at this point now, Romeo is banished for killing Tybalt. And so this, right, for me, is the closest link we could ever have to something like Goodfellas or Casino, because it is basically, this is gangs now. He's Romeo's banished for killing Tybalt because Tybalt's high up in the Capulets. So he's a high up guy in the Capulets, and it's essentially like he's whacked a boss without permission. So it's almost like what's Joe Pesci's character in Goodfellas, when he whacks one of the bosses he's not asked anyone, and he's just gone and done that of his own accord through sheer frustration because he can't control his emotions. And so this is definitely like almost a play-by-play of that. So he has whacked one of the high-up Capulets without any permission. So it's like, Romeo, you've been banished from the city, essentially. And so that's when it does become almost like there is that sort of hybrid between the modern day and the sort of the past. And it's when it's like, oh yeah, although it's modern day and we're driving cars and we've got guns and stuff,
banished.
Actually you're banished from the city. So it's like a proper hybrid at this point.
And at this point, it's
so
when...
he's
Sorry, you go.
Yeah, he goes and lives in a trailer. Sorry, carry on.
I was about to say, before he actually does banish himself, he manages to find one night to go and consummate his marriage with Juliet, because it's the same day. He's got married, then he's driven to the beach to go and see his mates. Then there's been a fight. Then there's a big kick-off. His best friend dies. He then chases the perpetrator, kills them. It happens to be Juliet's cousin. And then immediately afterwards, he's told he's banished, so where does he go? He goes to Juliet's house, which is a ballsy move. A very, very ballsy move.
Well, I mean, after all that, I'm not sure how in the mood I'd be. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how, after all that stuff, like, you'd to be honest, you'd be exhausted. You'd probably want to just have a cup of tea and sit on the couch. Well, you wouldn't want to be going and doing that, would you?
Juliet's very concerned about him, and she asks to see his wounds, which leads to him taking off his shirt, and we all know where it's going after
his
that.
Wounds in inverted commas.
Yeah. To be fair, he was battered on the beach. He was getting kicked in.
He was, yeah. He did get really beaten up.
So Romeo actually stays the night, and this scene is really important for me, which is why I didn't want to cut away from it, because this is their happiest point. Very strange, because they've just gone through the darkest patch of he's just killed her cousin, and she's angry at him at the start, but he explains what's happened, and then there's this kind of weird understanding that there was no choice, even though I would say there was a choice. But they're playing under the bed sheets, and when they're playing under the bed sheets, it's all like bright white light around them, and without reading too much into it, it does look quite heavenly. And this is after they've made love for the first time. The morning after, he needs to leave because he's been banished. And she says, stay, just because there's first light, it doesn't mean it's morning yet. You've got another few hours.
That's it.
They're playing under the sheets. But that sequence is weirdly in the narrative, because of what we've just said, is their highest point. And if you remember their love, that's what it would be. It would be them kissing in the lift, and it would be them the morning after.
That's a really common... So that... that's not the first time. Well, it's definitely not the last time that was done. So you see a lot of stuff like that portrayed, like especially when a character's lost their loved one, you'll see flashbacks to them under sheets, that kind of thing. So I think the thing I can think of off the top of my head is The Punisher.
Yeah.
So in The Punisher TV show,
100%.
he's thinking back, flashing back to his wife, and they're playing under the sheets and they're in bed. All of the bed sheets are white, and then kaboom.
Yes.
And it is that like you say, because it's all white, it is sort of dreamlike,
heavenly. Or, and
absolutely.
Again, you could say that's foreshadowing, or it's just interesting. But sorry, we then cut to Romeo being banished, and he is in his trailer. But
he's a trailer park boy.
He's a trailer park boy. But poor Juliet is having real issues because her father says to her, the arranged marriage is on Thursday, and she has no choice, and she begs her mother to stop it. Her mother, we find out, is dominated by the husband too. She has no choice, so she says, you'll be there. So Juliet visits the priest, and she says, I will end my life now rather than be doubly married. It's just not happening. Help me. So they hatch a plan, and their plan is one we all know about. She will take some poison, and it will help her fake her death because it will slow her pulse down enough. And once he will go and read her last rites, bring her to the church, and they will hold a fake funeral so she can run away with Romeo. And he says, I'm going to send a letter to Romeo to let him know the plan. So the plan is now in motion. And unfortunately, Romeo doesn't get the message. But what I love, and I've forgotten about, is you see Romeo miss the DHL man. And he's left him. We must have missed you notice. And I think in 2020 and 2021, that's the most relevant thing in the world. It's just brilliant.
Oh, it's incredible. It's almost. Do you know what? It's borderline as most impressive back in 1996 as the fact that Shakespeare came up with that in 1595. As in this, he wasn't mentioning DHL in his play. No. I just want to clarify that. He apparently wrote Romeo and Juliet between 1591 and 1596 or something, or 1594 or something. The elaborativeness of the story and the complexity of the story, the fact that it was written, like 400 years ago, is pretty amazing. Astonishing. It's astonishing.
But what I love about this sequence is, at this point, the reason Romeo we then cut to Juliet's funeral. And as it's about to begin, one of Romeo's crew, one of the Montagues, walks in and sees the fact that it's the funeral, and he doesn't know. He's not spoke to the priest. And just as the priest goes to speak to him, he runs away. He gets in the car. He drives out full pace, and we see Romeo. And he instantly knows something's wrong as the car's charging in. And he makes the decision that, forget about it. I'm going back to Verona. I need to be with my love. And he's decided at that point he's going to kill himself. But what's amazing is, before that, we cut to the priest going to the post office saying the package which has the letters in, and he receives it because has not been delivered. And we see in this montage the fact of all the things that went wrong and why that message didn't happen. So we learn what the plan is, see the priest go to the post office to send it, see the fact that the messenger went and took it and they didn't pick it up because Romeo was too busy hitting things with a baseball bat outside, like trailer trash, I suppose. Then it cuts back to it getting back to the DHL office, and then the priest going there saying, he's not got the message. And Pete Postlethwaite does it a lot more justice than I do. And at that point, Romeo's already committed to coming back to Verona. And just like the introduction when we saw these crazy quick cuts and fast pans, helicopters sweeping over, searchlights, all so melodramatic, big music, we see Romeo basically taking up arms and smashing into Verona, and he's got his pistols at the ready and he's taking no prisoners.
And this is, I guess, sort of the beginning of the end. It's Juliet has, and stop me if I'm skipping ahead, at this point, Juliet's she's taken this vial, which essentially slows her heartbeat so slow for 24 hours. So she essentially looks like she's dead, fakes her own death. Romeo gets news that she's dead, like thinks she's dead. It's his friend that sort of comes to visit him at his trailer park, says that he's dead, and then he goes to sort of be with her. And again, it's like, as we've mentioned throughout the whole podcast, the Instagram kind of setting / filter is when so he walks into the church, and it is sort of, there's neons, there's
neon cross,
candles. It's unlike anything you've really seen, to be honest. Like,
it's stunning.
This again, Baz Luhrmann, like, I know I said it towards the beginning, but it's so innovative, and it's so brave what he's done for this. Like, it never would have worked any, like, he's pulled it off. Like, he's pulled this off, and he's done it in such a good way. And I don't think anyone else could have done that.
No, I love the fact
yeah.
that every shot of this film, there's such depth and texture to it. Film is all about creating depth. So you never film anything straight on. You always film it to the corner of a room or a corner of a location to get that depth. You can layer it in different ways, and lighting's used. But what Baz Luhrmann's doing is he's using movement from the choreography of what the people are actually doing. You've then got the costumes being so vibrant and popping out from the background. The camera work is moving against the people also moving. And then you've got all this frenetic, kinetic, whatever you want to call it, energy going on from other people moving in the background. So it's always such a busy frame. Again, it is comparable to Michael Bay. And again, it's comparable to things like a film we almost looked at, West Side Story, which has a lot of energy.
We were so close to looking at West Side Story for the pairing on this. I do want to say, when we say it's Michael Bay, we are not saying that as a slight.
No, not at all.
Like, in any way, like, as in like Michael Bay is, people really do have an issue with Michael Bay, but he does a certain thing very, very well. Baz Luhrmann also appears to do a certain thing very, very well. I just wanted to, will want to touch upon Baz Luhrmann real quick after we've finished explaining this final absolutely devastating scene. And that scene is sort of, and I'm sure you'll go into more depth about it, Jonny. Juliet's lying there. She's, and you know what's going to happen. You absolutely know, because it's a 400-year-old story.
But you still think it might not. You still think when you watch it, it might not happen.
Maybe not. It could be like we literally just spoke about last episode. Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and you know what? Actually, what if? Why did we not pick up on this? What if they had both something different would have happened? What if DHL would have actually delivered? Hey, what if DHL were DPD? You know you'd have got that parcel. We've completely missed the point there. Like, what if Romeo, and at this point now, when I say what if, I mean Juliet's lying there. She's so close to coming around. She's so close to coming around. Is Romeo can't see the wood for the trees. It's over for him. He is literally, he's there. And he's got the poison, and
which he's purchased from some guy at
just
some
like
random
really,
guy, some dingy.
I reckon, yeah, definitely. So the guy that he purchased this poison from, I reckon that was the same guy that did Penny's abortion in Dirty Dancing.
Yeah,
dodgy
guy. Yeah,
like
that's true.
You get the idea, back alley guy. So yeah, so there he is. He's got the poison, this tiny little vial. And he just can't live without her. And that is essentially what it is. He can't live without her. Downs the poison. There he is, starts choking immediately. She's showing like a flutter of eyelash, a quiver of the old finger, and very slowly. And this is why it's so devastating. The way Baz Luhrmann's portrayed, sort of shot it, he sees her waking up while he's dying. And she thinks it's devastating.
Yeah, she sees him and she thinks she's in this great moment of, yes, he's finally here. And then there's a realization of, what have you done, my love? And it goes from her lying down to him lying down. She's trying to sort him out, and it's too late. He's taken the poison and he dies, and she kisses him to try and transfer the poison to her and kill herself. And it doesn't work. And the only thing that's left next to her, and this is an update, is usually Juliet stabs herself in the story, but there's a pistol, and it's quite brutal. She picks up the gun, and the church is deathly silent. You don't hear any noise. It's so quiet. And then there's almost a countdown, 3, 2, 1, silent countdown, bang, and she kills herself. And The blood splatters. It's quite brutal for a 12. Actually, it's harsh. You know, it doesn't shy away from it. But what's eerily beautiful, and this is very emo imagery here, is when they're lying together on the bed. They're surrounded by this amazing. We'll have to put an image up when we put a tweet
like
about this. It's raised almost like she's in a tomb, but she's on top, and there's candles all around it. And the shot we see is from above, like a bird's eye view, and it starts at their level, and it just pulls back, gets higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, and they're just surrounded by candles. And again, it's sort of, with the church setting, it makes it kind of heavenly or...
It's like biblical,
angelic, and
definitely.
It's stunning. Production design, so melodramatic. It all is, it just feeds it. Theatrical.
Yeah, and it works. Theatrical. It absolutely works, yeah. There's many times where it breaks that wall of film and goes into theatrical, like as you've mentioned a few times. There's a piece where Claire Danes talks to the camera as well. She crouches down like she's talking to an audience. But yeah, that part is absolutely devastating to everyone. Even though we know what's going to happen, seeing it, you still can't help but feel really, really sad. Like it's her waking up and him dying. It's honestly like like you said, she is buzzing that he's there. It is literally like it was like Edge returning at the Royal Rumble. It honestly, for any wrestling fans out there, when Edge returned at the Royal Rumble last year, it was like that. She sees him and she's absolutely, oh my god. Yeah. That's my little wrestling quip there.
So final thoughts really, because that is the end of the film, and we end on how we started with a TV news broadcast. And what's amazing, it says within the next 2 hours we're going to see the events unfold, and it does finish within 2 hours, bang on the mark. So love that. That must have taken a hell of a lot of effort.
No, I didn't know that.
Imagine the amount of effort for the poor editor trying to get that sorted with the delivery and everything. But
that's incredible.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I must say, the style is of a particular taste. It does. You feel like you had an attack on the senses almost, and it does feel like you're being hammered away at. But as I said, I know why. The intent is there to make this engaging. Yes, this is in old Shakespearean English, but get on board with it. It's very, very different in the way it's presented to the fact that it could have been a period piece. It could have been done that way. But the fact they've been bold enough to make it a modern interpretation, I really genuinely really enjoyed it. But I can't say that it's an easy watch, if that makes any sense. I think it's a very good film, but I don't think it's an easy watch. And I don't mean that because of the subject matter. I mean the style. I think some people will be turned off. I think they'll say, this is too frenetic, too crazy. I'm not about that. And I think others will kind of get on board for the ride and go with it.
It's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. You feel like you've been for a workout. Like it's definitely, I know what you're saying, and I know exactly what you mean. And I was actually, I'd had a pretty long day at work and got in and watched it, and I was like, I texted you saying I'm about to watch Romeo and Juliet. I said I'm knackered, and you were like, yeah, you're like, it's
I said good luck for the emotional roller coaster you're about to sit on for 2 hours, which is just like being hit over the head with a hammer, which is exactly what it is. But it's making you feel the emotions the teenagers feel. That's what Romeo and Juliet feel.
Absolutely,
and that is the point, and that is why it is the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, I feel exactly the same way as you. I really enjoyed the film. I would quite like to see Baz Luhrmann take his hand to an action film, to be honest, a full-blown action film, just to see what he's capable of. Like he's definitely, I don't want to say he's a one-trick pony, but he definitely does a film of a particular style, and I'd just like to see him do something completely different. So then after this, we had a big debate on this for a while. We had a big debate on the last podcast about what we were going to pair that with. Jonny won in the end, finally, and then Jonny didn't win this one. So guess what? So Jonny was like, yeah, I posed a few films to him. He was like, oh, should we do it with West Side Story? No, I said that. Did I say West Side Story?
And I can't even remember.
Right. Well, in the end,
it was a bloodbath.
I didn't want to do it. I'm going to be honest. We found out West Side Story was a full-blown Romeo and Juliet reimagining as well. So I was just like, no chance. So everyone's probably wondering, why the hell have you paired it with this? But we're going to tell you. We paired it with 2002, City of God.
Rio de Janeiro. The beach. The nightlife. The romance. But 15 miles from paradise is a place called the City of God.
City of God, I hadn't seen it before. It had been on my list for so long, and I thought, do you know what? There is this gangster element. There was so much iconography of the that a Christ statue. What statue is? It's the statue in Rio de Janeiro. Yeah. So Jonny, you said you'd seen this before.
So I had seen City of God, but back at college, which is over 10 years ago now. So I did remember bits of it, but not all of it. But I'm really glad we did rewatch it because it's a true story. And the reason we picked it for Romeo and Juliet is the fact that it's a story about rival gangs. And again, the effect on the community, because in Paul Verona, we don't really see in Romeo and Juliet the effect so much on the community, was in this film we truly do. Because the gang warfare extends not only to adults, but it goes all the way down to children, which is why it is so shocking.
So essentially, for those who don't know what this film is, it's a Brazilian film, and essentially it's a gangster film, I guess. So it's a film based in a shanty town it starts from the 1960s, and it becomes this place in Rio de Janeiro, this small town, becomes basically one of the most dangerous places to live. The movie sort of follows several characters, but most notably, it follows this kid. Jonny, do you remember the kid's name?
Rocket.
That's it. Yeah. So it follows. Yeah, they call him Rocket. Yeah. So it follows this kid called Rocket, who I guess it appears on the surface that he's quite a decent kid. He's got a bit of a brain. But again, it does that sort of the beginning of City of God is the end of the film.
Yeah, the really non-linear narrative. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so again, straight away, it's the visual style I didn't find was that dissimilar to Romeo and Juliet in the beginning.
Yes, it's
like
quick
really
cuts, 360 cameras. Again, we talk about Michael Bay, but it is that kind of style, the frenetic energy style where the movement of the camera is almost as important as the movement of the people within the camera.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the start. It's almost at points like a documentary, and what I mean by that is
absolutely.
When they're in a chase, you're running with them, and they're chasing a chicken, and you're chasing. The shot is as if you're the kid going for the chicken. You know,
absolutely. And it's there's a lot of handheld camera, and it feels rough, just like the place that they're in.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like it feels really rough, and it feels. It's a shanty town. The favelas and stuff. That's where they're all living. It's not an affluent area, and it's essentially. I would sort of compare it a lot. It is Brazilian Goodfellas in a way.
Yeah, because it's the rise and the fall of a leading empire. Well, I say empire. That's a bit dramatic, but a crime empire. Because there's one kid who, at a young age, thinks I want to be a gangster, and he hangs around with what they thought were, part-time gangsters in the 60s and 70s, was it? The start of the film?
60s, yeah. So it's like 60s and 80s. It kind of
and
you sort of see
this kid's only 10 or 13, and he goes
Lil
around,
Dice. His name's Lil Dice.
Yeah, and he kills people at that age, and he's kind of established at a young age that he wants to be a gangster. And it's the film for me is showing how pointless gang warfare is, because every person who gets into the gang is avenging someone else, and by the end of the film nearly everybody has shot everybody up and there's nothing left. That's kind of what this film is about. How everyone's getting sucked in, and they can try and avoid it and try and be morally the best they can be, but in that environment the gang rules. The police are so far removed from it, they haven't got a choice. And when the police come in, the police establish them as gang members, even if they're not gang members. So it's,
absolutely, yeah. And it's that the tagline of the film explains literally what you've just said. The tagline of the film says, "If you run, you're dead. If you stay, you're dead again." Period. So it's about you're here. There's no escape, and that's it. Like it follows. You've got like the hierarchy, which again is just like the families in Romeo and Juliet. There's so many parallels to Romeo and Juliet. That's why we paired it. And so there's really not too much to say about it, because I don't really want to spoil it for people, because it is really such an impactful film. for people to watch. And I would tell you all, like, this is an incredible film, isn't it?
I would say as well, though, that another link to Romeo and Juliet would be the fact that a lot of the events of the film that take place is because Rocket, he meets a girl, and it all starts with him wanting to impress a girl, so he goes to buy her a joint, which is how he ends up rubbing shoulders with the gang, and it all leads back to that idea of, I don't know, he's a teenager who wants to have his first girlfriend, so he wants to impress her, and his way of impressing her is by getting her a joint, and he ends up being in the wrong place at the wrong time and meets Little Dice for the first time, but Little Dice is no longer Little Dice. Is he Big Z or Little Z?
Little Z.
Little Z.
He's now Little Z, yeah. And he is absolutely brutal.
Horrible person.
Yeah, there are like, this must have been quite difficult for you, Jonny, actually, because you're not really that tolerant of violence.
I thought it was quite tastefully done, actually. It is a violent film, but it's not glorifying the violence. It's to shock you to say how awful this is. Yeah. And again, it's a lot of people avenging people, so
exactly.
I'm not justifying it, but you kind of, do you know what I mean? The violence is serving a purpose rather than being, here's Saw or here's Hostel and I'm going to drill into somebody's leg. That's the kind of thing I can't process particularly.
Yeah, like nonsensical, like
torture porn or whatever.
Yeah. This is pretty much just a film about drug dealers screwing over other drug dealers, and there's a cycle. It just follows this constant cycle of these bad people replacing other bad people,
and how a whole community is ruined by it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the whole shanty town is sort of like reliant on drugs in the end, and it kind of says, oh yeah, but like this guy Little Z, he takes over the whole shanty town, and he stops a lot of the violence there through taking over and like selling drugs. So it's kind of like it's not a good thing. And there's the runts who are like, you realize towards the end that the runts are actually what Little Z was in the beginning. They are like these kids who are sort of like the beginning of the
next gangster movement, the next essentially
generation. Yeah. And there's a scene where they shoot this kid just for like no reason. It's just awful. And then the one good guy in this gang, if you could call him a good guy, and I guess he was. His name's Benny. He is actually the one that's he's sort of level-headed, always talking down Little Z, like to try and stop him from doing bad things. It is the perfect example of nice guys finish last.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I don't really want to go more into City of God because it's definitely worth watching, but it's a cult film at this point. I think it's not exactly a deep cut.
Sorry, it's actually available on Amazon Prime at the moment as well. It's a rental, but I think it was only $3.50 to rent, and it's well worth a watch.
Well, don't just make sure you don't rent it on PS5 because my copy was a disgrace. I was texting Jonny pictures of the copy that I had, and it was absolutely horrendous. So in the end, I had to cast it off my phone. But yeah, if you don't have a PS5, by the way, that sounds like I'm bragging that I've got a PS5. No, it's not. No, not at all. I didn't even think about it. Yeah, sorry guys. Like, I do have a PS5. Yeah, what's my media center. I don't use it for games. Just media. I'm joking. That's me just wanting to use it. Right. Anyway, guys. So, as per usual, we finish the show with a couple of questions from our listeners. Daniel writes in and asks, "What's your favourite part of the modernisation of Romeo and Juliet?"
I've touched upon this very briefly, but I love the fact that the guns are named after the swords, and the fact it does the 70s crash zoom into the name each time every time they're in a Mexican standoff. I think that's great. And I also, to be honest, we've talked about the kinetic kind of really fast-paced camera movement edit. I actually like the style. I know I've just told you why it's quite a lot for some people, but I just think it's a perfect match for this because of the fact that it is Old English, so you've got to keep people entertained, and it knows that, and it's picked that right style to do that, and it does keep you engaged. And also the physical performances from the actors, even if you don't understand the words, you can see from their face and the emotions what they mean, and I think that all works through the style that the director's picked.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, for me, I've probably got to say the camera work, the camera work, but also the fact that it's a hybrid, like the fact that it's a hybrid, that you've got Shakespearean verse and you've got a completely modern take. So you've got the guns, the cars, but they're still speaking in Shakespearean verse. For me, that is the most impactful part of the whole film. So next we've got a question from Ben, who again writes into moviesinapodshell@gmail.com, just like you can. And he says, what's your favorite romantic film?
I've got two that I think are romantic films, but you might say they're other films as well, because some films cross genres. So the first one that flew to my head was La La Land. I think that is a love film. I think it's a romantic film, but it's also a musical. But it's a heartbreak film. I don't know. But another film I thought of, which is probably more controversial for it because it's more of a thriller, is Vertigo. Vertigo to me is a story of obsessive love. It's not romantic, I suppose, but it's yeah.
I mean, I've gone a bit more straight down the line with my films. I've got a few. Obviously, you know what my favourite romantic film is, and it's Dirty Dancing. Come on, get out of town. But all joking aside, probably Shape of Water is one of them. When Harry Met Sally, I know that is really generic answer, but there's a reason why it's generic. And then The Apartment. Have you seen The Apartment, Jonny?
No, I haven't.
Oh my goodness. And that is going to be an episode. Because, and I think I say this every episode when I talk about a film that I absolutely love. The Apartment it's amazing. I'd implore anyone to see it. I only watched it for the first time last year, I think, and yeah, it's fantastic. It's directed by Billy Wilder, 1960. Got probably one of my favorite quotes of all time in it. The last question,
I've actually got one more.
Go on. You've got one more. Go on, then.
No, it's not a favourite, but it's one that I watched recently, which was just really heartwarming. We watched 10 Things I Hate About You, and when I forgot his name. When Heath Ledger is declaring his love and singing it in front of the band, etc., I thought that was a good rom-com. I had fun with that.
It's funny that you mention that, because actually the next question was any remakes of classics you like. And what Andrew says, like, is he means the classics as in classic literature. So remakes of classics you like. So funny you mention that, because 10 Things I Hate About You is one of my absolute favourite films, and it's after William Shakespeare. It's like William Shakespeare play, and it's Taming of the Shrew. Yeah. So that is literally my favourite remake, maybe. Yeah. What about you, Jonny?
I've got a few down. I put King Kong, and I put the Peter Jackson one. I really like the Peter Jackson King Kong. I'm sure that it's not as great as the 1933 one. I love the fact the 1933 one was done photochemically and it wasn't CGI, etc. But no, I do. I've read a whole book on just how that film was made and how groundbreaking it was then. But I really enjoy Peter Jackson's King Kong. It's long, I can't say otherwise, but there's a lot I like about it. I suppose that's almost a bit of a love story as well, because Kong's in love with Naomi Watts' character. But anyway, another literary, is it a literary classic or not? In the Universal film series, they have all the old ones from the 40s and 50s, and they have The Mummy.
Yeah.
I really like the Brandon Fraser one.
To be honest, I don't think you're alone, mate. Like, because like the Brendan Fraser one, the Mummy and The Mummy Returns are both really, really good. You don't like The Mummy Returns?
Returns is the one where they kind of ran out of budget towards the end. Some of the CGI is really bad. So the first one's dated better than the second one. But I was obsessed with the first one because my dad had a computer with a DVD drive, and it was a tiny screen to watch it on. You know, the old computer screens that was square, but it wasn't that big.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And he said, "Oh, we're gonna rent a DVD." You know, we were talking about rental stories, and this is the first.
Yeah, it's like a big event, isn't it?
And I remember being, "Oh my god, we're gonna rent a DVD," and I was probably watching on a screen which is smaller than most people's laptop screens now. But anyway. And I was so excited, and I was terrified of that film. In hindsight, I've watched it fairly recently. It's really not that scary. The bugs going under the skin is not very nice, but I remember just being in awe of DVD. The fact that you put a disc in the computer and it played back video, and it was really good picture quality back then.
Oh my god! Compared
so
because the
good.
only thing you could compare it to is VHS,
which looks awful at all times.
Yeah, I guess it does. Yeah, you got to sort your tracking out and all that kind of thing. It was not good. So you mentioned The Mummy. What about Jurassic Park?
I suppose that is a literary remake, technically, or a visual interpretation of it. Yeah.
It is, yeah, no, it's Michael Crichton wrote the book. Yeah.
I want to rewatch that film because I've not watched it for a while, but yeah, I've always loved Jurassic Park. Another story on that, my dad used to tape a lot of films off the TV, and I remember we had a tape of Jurassic Park, and when I was like 7, I said, what's the scariest film you've ever seen? And he obviously probably gauged that I was going to do something about it, so he was like, oh, Jurassic Park. That's
hilarious.
So then I would run up to the office and got the Jurassic Park tape and watched it when it was out, and it did terrify me, and he was really annoyed I watched it, but I thought it's just really funny that he obviously kind of clocked something was going to happen, so he was like, yeah, Jurassic Park, that's the scariest film. But I also remember he used to have, when you had the longer tapes, you could do the extended play. So I used to be obsessed with...
Yeah, because it was short play and long play, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I was obsessed with Wallace and Gromit, and Wallace and Gromit was on a video straight after Pulp Fiction. So for years, I would have to skip past the end of Pulp Fiction. I had no clue as a kid what Pulp Fiction was for context.
Yeah.
To get to the bit where Wallace and Gromit and the Wrong Trousers started. But the annoying thing was on the Wrong Trousers, the recording started after the thing had started. So for years, I'd never seen the opening 5 minutes of Wallace and Gromit and the Wrong Trousers. Anyway, that's it's so funny.
It's funny you mention that because I actually was meant to mention the Pulp Fiction, my small tiny Pulp Fiction story at the beginning. So I had my nan again. I mentioned you're probably going to hear a lot about my nan on the podcast. Like, obviously, unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but she's probably the one that got me into VHS anyway, and just movies in general. But she had Pulp Fiction on VHS, and there wasn't much she would not let me watch. So I would go through her her VHS cabinet, and I'd be like looking at stuff, and I pulled out Pulp Fiction one day, and my nan had Pulp Fiction on VHS. I realize now at 32 how cool that is. Like, my nan had Pulp Fiction on VHS. What a legend. And so I pull out this VHS, and I see it, and I'm like, right, it's red with yellow writing, and I'm like, oh, and it's got Uma Thurman on the front, and she looks really hot. So I'm just like, do you know what? Like, this looks good. Nan, what's this? And she's like, you can't watch that, son. And I was like, but no, it really looks good. No. So it's not for kids. It's an adult film. You can't watch that. Stick Dirty Dancing on. And that was literally that was it. I never got to watch Pulp Fiction for ages. And like you said, until there was no one in the house, and there was my granddad would have been downstairs. So I was like banging on Pulp Fiction as soon as she gets there. And obviously I didn't get it at the time. That's it for episode 5. It's gone by so fast. I can't believe we're already on episode 5, and soon we'll be on episode 6. As usual, guys, we thank you so much for all the support, all the listens. We can't believe it's going so well. Please, 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 if you listen on iTunes, please rate us. We only accept 5 stars, and you should know this by now. So please rate us, please listen, please tell your friends. I, as per usual, have been Jamie at Movies in a Nutshell on Instagram, and we have Jonny
at jcb.video.
And there we go. That's a wrap. Thanks very much. See you next time.